So welcome everybody. I'm so glad you made it and you signed up to join us for this session with Raven. Raven will introduce herself in a little bit. It is about the Service Enterprise Initiative, which is all about excellence in volunteer and community engagement. We'll go over some of the objectives for today, and then I'll introduce myself a little bit more and tell you a little bit more about the Lodestar Center and why this is such a good fit for us to be the Arizona statewide hub for the Service Enterprise Initiative. And then we'll go a little bit through the research and what are the goals and what were the outcomes and the accreditation process. And then we definitely want some time for your questions, but you can also please just ask questions throughout. And Raven will tell you a lot about about their journey at a new leaf through this organizational change model that they've been through twice, because they got originally certified and then got recertified after 3 years. We recertify every 3 years just to help with the continuous improvement cycle and to kind of, with all the staff turnover, to make sure these systems and all this hard work that was put in place remains in place and becomes institutionalized and doesn't go away if people go away. Today it's about gaining a high-level understanding of an organization-wide cultural change management program that accredits the organization as a service enterprise. It's the seal of excellence in volunteer engagement throughout the organization, so not just in a certain area. And the goal is really to not have volunteerism be a branch of the tree, if you want to follow me along with this image, but to get it in the root system of the tree. I'm gonna have to admit some people here real quick, sorry about that. And then we will learn from an expert at an accredited organization about the process and the benefits and what they learned on their journey. My name is Sandra Freyer. I'm here at the Arizona Lodestar Center, and I've been here for about 3 years. I've been in the space of volunteer engagement, skilled volunteer engagement, and training organizations and training the volunteers, because if you have a professional volunteer or freshly retired VP of something come in, they don't understand the nonprofit sector always, right? So there's not just the organization being ready for the volunteer, there's also the volunteer being ready for the organization. That's another piece. And I've been in that space for about a decade, and in nonprofit, working with volunteers in the programmatic areas I spent 20 years at St. Mary's Food Bank. So very familiar, Abigail, with food banking and food insecurity and those kind of things. So that's a little bit about me. Here at the center, we're all about educating, empowering, and connecting the nonprofit sector as a whole, people who are interested in it, people who are in it, people who want to fund it. And so we do a lot of capacity building for professional and individual development for your staff, for volunteer leads, for people who think about transitioning into this field, or who are already in the field and just want to gain more insights or want to get some certifications and accreditations to elevate their professional standing. And obviously, we work with organizations as a whole. So we do board governance, strategic planning, and this is where the Service Enterprise Initiative really fits well with the capacity building of the organization. And with this, I am going to hand it over to Raven to tell us a little bit more about her organization. And Raven, you can just tell me next slide.
Yeah, I'm Raven Yosick. I'm the individual volunteer and intern program supervisor for New Leaf. I have worked in the nonprofit sector my entire career, whether it was starting as a swim lesson instructor at the YMCA, growing into after-school programs through the Boys and Girls Club and other organizations, to then growing into philanthropy administration and the fundraising development department. Throughout my career, I've overseen volunteers within the classroom, within the programs, and nurtured their development, led trainings, classroom management trainings, project management trainings, and volunteer development trainings, so that we could better strengthen volunteer opportunities, utilize them as strengths within our environments, and things like that. I came to a new leaf, during COVID in October of 2020. They were just certified in SCI, and it built an opportunity for me to come in and lead their initiative, as I came from another organization that had been certified in Service Enterprise already, and I understood the structure. I came in to help lead this initiative and support building a new structure, as during COVID, they shut everything down. We didn't have volunteers. We had very few remote volunteers still supporting us that I came in to work with and develop a whole new process. A New Leaf has 7 pillars of service. We have over 40 programs and over 30 locations and growing. So they really wanted a healthy structure, stability, to bring volunteers into the agency. And SCI was our ticket. And during that first year, I hunkered down and investigated and structured and built and implemented. So when we were ready to open again, we could welcome volunteers into a newly formed volunteer program. So this has been great for our agency. Then a couple years in, I led the recertification team to recertify under what we had already certified. So moving the pendulum even more. And still to this day, we are still taking our SEI standards and guidelines and still moving that pendulum even more, the best that we can. Okay. So I have a couple slides to share about our journey. When we first started with Service Enterprise, we didn't really do so hot. Our lowest score was a 42, our highest score was a 78, and it really kind of broadened where we were in these guidelines and as a volunteer program. We had to make a lot of promises towards the characteristics as to what we wanted to focus on to develop, and implement that structure as we went along. So we ended up having a return on investment about $3.50, which is below average, but it was a start. So from there, we decided to invest all that time during our shutdown to restructure, educate our team, educate our leadership, and get things up to speed. By the next time we recertified, we had moved that pendulum a great deal more. So we ended up scoring at 86%. Under our recertification, our scores did go up drastically. So then our lowest score was an 80, our highest score was a 93. And we were able to provide more proof and documentation as to how much work we had put in within those next 3 years. And that gave us the ability to recertify, and then our return on investment doubled. So now we were up to $6.17, bringing in volunteers under a healthy structure, having a healthy onboarding process, training process, and established more relationships within our programs to train staff on how to welcome volunteers into the agency as well. So this was with Service Enterprises guidelines, and we had to look at our infrastructure. We are a big agency. We don't have a volunteer coordinator or a community engagement coordinator at every location. So we have to partner with our managers, partner with our supervisors and team members to support the volunteers that are placed in their programs. Currently, our structure is that as we welcome new managers and supervisors into the agency, they go through supervisor training. We have a training manager that leads that training, and in there, I have a component where I introduce the volunteer program, what it is, how we support programs, and then what that intake process would look like. What's the commitment to taking volunteers into your program? This is for any supervisor entering the agency or any person that's been promoted to a supervisor. And then with that, then we start the process. Their program already might have volunteers, but they would still need to go through our program intake process as a new leader in their program or department. So we then go to the spinoff of leadership training, our supervisor training. So they would reach out to me. We would book volunteer management training with the supervisor and whoever they want to have support volunteers in their program. We go through a very laid out plan as to how volunteers would be integrated into their program, how they can be help support their staff and overlap in tasks. We talk about strategic planning, staffing planning. So where do they see volunteers supporting their program, and in what areas? Is it administrative? Is it frontline? Is it a combination of both? Is it some external things, remote volunteers and things like that? And then we develop strong position descriptions. We want to make sure those position descriptions have enough work for the volunteers, have a robust integration into the team and impact, and have that meaningful experience. From there we go, I post that. As soon as we have an agreement, I post that for recruitment. We start a recruitment process, but we're not done with our program intake yet. When we get a volunteer ready to start in that program, especially if it's a brand new program, then we do a volunteer engagement training where the manager invites me into their program. They introduce the position descriptions they want to have volunteers come in under to the team. And from there, I lead a training on the best practices of engaging volunteers and what that means to the team. What's their accountability to welcoming, stewarding, cultivating volunteers, empowering them, training them to work alongside them as well. We go into our recruitment process. We are a large agency. I'm the doorway into the agency. We have a software that everybody puts in an application. So we host a screening process, an interview process. Then we have our agency orientation and onboarding, and I provide the tools and training to the programs of what they should be doing, a checklist with the volunteers as they enter. During that engagement training, and staffing planning, we go over what is the greeting of volunteers and interns into their program. And so this program orientation and training is part of that process. They have built that this is the person they check in with. If that person's not there, everybody should understand that process so that they can welcome that volunteer, check off their orientation, and lead their training. Especially if they're partnered with somebody other than their direct supervisor. Are they Are they partnering with admin team? Are they partnering with a program team member? That they'll be delivering that training. And then from the start of the intake process, we put that program into the ongoing support. So I host weekly office hours, for virtual office hours for everyone to have an opportunity to come in, ask questions, bring concerns. I share a report out from that weekly meeting of the topics we covered and the tools that they can utilize. Then we have weekly, bi-monthly, and monthly reporting to continue our communication with the programs, to show numbers, what volunteers we've interviewed and screened, where we are in the onboarding process for some of those volunteers and interns. And then I provide any tools that they need to continue to successfully manage their volunteers. So a lot of it is the tools we utilize with HR because we do mirror their process. So if we need to redirect an intern, we have learning agreements, and we have other forms that we use even with the staff of here, let's redirect in this capacity. Then we have an offboarding process because we want to stay connected with our volunteers and interns. If a volunteer says, I need to stop volunteering, we usually do a personal call, see as to why. Sometimes they just need a medical break because they have surgery and they just don't, feel like that they can volunteer at this time, but we don't want them to disappear. So we can say, we can put you on medical leave. please come back to us. We'd love to have you continue. Interns get an exit survey. They are considered our episodic volunteers. They have a clear start date and end date. So we still want to collect information about their internship experience. And then if somebody, anytime anybody leaves the agency, we still provide the supervisor with an exit survey to see what their experience was with the volunteer program and with that volunteer. And then we always want to leave with a letter of gratitude or reference. Students love to get a letter of reference that they can take on, and just a letter of gratitude for people's time is huge. We want to keep them connected, know how much they appreciate us. Volunteer time right now is a value of $33 and maybe some like 90 cents an hour. And when you add up 2 years of volunteer experience to that, it can be thousands of dollars back to the agency in support and time. So we just want to let them know how much we appreciate that. So when we recertified, part of the process of certification is identifying where your volunteers lie, one-time volunteers, episodic, and we identified these a little differently in our agency. We don't have a lot of one-time drop-in experiences for individuals, but we identify group volunteers as those one-time volunteer supports. And we have a process of calculating how many unique visitors we have. So it's a little tedious, but we want to make sure that we know how many unique visitors are coming to our agency. I like that process because then if we do have repetitive individuals, I would love to reach out to them and see if they want to onboard as an individual separate from a group. But we average that they're doing 4.8 hours of service each individual, which is a lot of time. Our interns are our episodic volunteers. Again, they have a clear start date and end date, and they lead a lot of projects. So when a program has a project they want to move forward, we try to find the right type of intern with the right education and skill sets to move that project forward a little bit more. I preface it that interns aren't going to always finish the project, but they can start it, get it off the ground, and when they end, they need to have a clear section where they stop. They leave their notes and a succession plan for the next intern you bring on board and move that project even further or maybe complete it. Our individual volunteers are our ongoing support. So they're the ones that will probably be on site with us anywhere between 3 to 8 hours a week. And they're amazing. And we do have clear position descriptions that support what they're going to do so that they can own their role. Some of them are a little broader because we want to be able to identify their skill sets and point them in the right direction under that position description as to what they're going to support. And we train the team on letting them own those roles. Our admin office has been doing an amazing job with those volunteers over there. Our front desk admin staff, she's got 2 awesome volunteers, and she gives them, you're going to own X and Y, and you're going to own A and B. And every time you come in, those are your tasks. And they're heavy tasks, so they have a lot to complete, and they know that they own that. That's what they come in to do. They're cross-trained on answering phones, greeting people, moving them in the right direction, but those are the tasks that they will complete while they're there. Our donation center volunteers are amazing. We have one that she has been with us for so long. We've bumped her up in her leadership. And now she goes from program to program anytime somebody needs extra volunteer donation center support. And she is clear on the rules and guidelines of our donation center, and she brings to them supplies, or she says, hey, if your program can't use this, I'll take it back to the donation center. We know another program that can use it. So she does an amazing job. And we have several volunteers in that anytime a program's like, hey, our closet's a little behind, we'll reach out to that group and be like, hey, anyone have some extra hours this week that can go over here and help them organize it, especially because they're well versed in how things should look and be categorized. And then we have a lot of remote volunteer opportunities. Most of these are students for us or in administrative roles. Some of it are our service learning students that want to come in and just do a few hours for 10 or 20 hours. To be client facing in our agency, we only place students that are 40 hours or more. And that's a commitment of 4 hours a week for 10 weeks. So we tried to make sure we get a minimum of 10-week commitment to support the program and be that return on investment for them. But anybody under that, we see them as remote volunteers and have them support us in other ways. So I have a great community engagement manager or coordinator who has wonderful ideas just pouring out her head as the ways that they could support her or support the agency. And so she's usually my point person to send them to and say, hey, I got another student who needs 10 hours. And she's like, send them to me. So we get that taken care of. But in the end, when we recertified and did this, we had identified the percentage of skilled participants, and most of them were very skilled because we focused our skill sets to the position descriptions and matched them great to impact in those areas. And because we also have a lot of students that supported us in many ways because we were meeting their educational goals.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all that information. There were a lot of golden nuggets that people can start thinking about, and there are probably more to come as we're going through the rest of the presentation.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about Service Enterprise and reaccreditation. What is it? Service Enterprise is an organization that fundamentally, and you heard Raven give so many examples, fundamentally leverage volunteers and their skills throughout the organization. So it's not it's the day-to-day, but it's also in a very strategic way. It's skilled volunteers, it's one-time volunteers. How can we have a deeper impact on our social mission, although the funding may not be there? And we all know we can never hire enough people. That funding will never be there. So how can we achieve more utilizing the community and engaging the community in a very strategic way and leverage that in a very strategic way throughout the organization? And that's exactly our goal. We want to strengthen the capacity of the organization to do this strategically and effectively, and to address organizational needs and community needs. So we're looking internal and what do we want to achieve for the community. This is really research-based. There's a lot of research that had been done around this before it got launched. The research started in around 2009, so we've been at it for over a decade. We have increased. Originally, there were like 8 categories that CEOs were asked about, and executive directors, if their organization does this effectively. And as you can see on the slide, the highest category was volunteer appreciation, but even there, only 30% of the CEOs surveyed thought they did that well. So it became, and then it goes down from there. So it became very apparent that there is a lot of room for capacity building to do this volunteer engagement piece more strategically, more intentionally, and to give organizations the tools and the training to do so. This research was done by the TCC group, and they really saw that there were top performers in volunteer management and organizational performance. And they didn't just, they looked at some of these volunteer management pieces, but they also looked at other core capacities like leadership and adaptability, management and technical capacity, overall organizational cultures, and they found that about 11% of the organizations that they looked at did this at a very high level. And they statistically, that if there's any people who took statistics or still very familiar with the names, those people are called, or these organizations are called, positive deviants. So if Service Enterprise is not the best name for the model because it's not too necessarily intuitive, what is it? It's better than positive deviance. So I'm good with it. So they really thought that, they really found there's some critical components around this, and had some key findings. And these key findings were that that nonprofits that deploy volunteers on an ongoing basis and have strong volunteer management models, they outperform their peers in all organizational capacities. So they're either doing that well and then it bleeds over in the other capacities, or they are strong in the other capacities and it bleeds. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? But as a package, when that's done very well, the organization performs better than the peers in all capacities. The other key finding was that it appears to be a very strong correlation between managing volunteers well and some measure of volunteer effectiveness. It really is that it really feels that or it showed that if they're managed well, they also exhibited much stronger leadership and management behaviors across the organization, which then also would explain why they are so strong in their capacity, in all the capacities. In addition to being better led and managed, nonprofits that are service enterprise are functioning on the service enterprise level are more adaptable, sustainable, and capable of going to scale, which is what we all aim to do, to serve more people in our community. We're always looking at that. The fourth key finding is that service enterprises have strong and well-developed human resources. And Raven mentioned they are copying in how they're bringing in the volunteers and how an unpaid employee and a paid employee is really not that different in their organization. They're mirroring, they're like, why have two different processes? They are all human resources that help us do our job. And we don't have to have a different system and different processes for one than for the other. And she also talked a lot about skilled volunteers and how they use volunteers. So just like with employees, some maybe have to be background checked more heavily and others less. So they're really mirroring that with their HR model. And Raven, you might want to briefly talk about the transition that your reporting structure has recently changed as well, right?
Yes. So at the beginning of our fiscal year for 2023 to 2024, they moved the volunteer and intern program to HR. So we're no longer in philanthropy. We report to HR directly so that we can work a little bit closer with impacting the human capital in our agency. So as things change in HR, we have better communication to mirror those changes. And utilize the tools that they're implementing to support the managers and supervisors better. So instead of catching up to HR, we're more trying to we're aligning with them. So we're part of their team now. So we can get those updates as they go. And also we have, an internal website for our employees, and on there, volunteers and interns have a page. So we link, as we say, hey, because we're on the HR page. So as they put up tools for supervisors to use to help manage their team, we link back and forth to those resources as well to say, yeah, you can use this tool or you can use that tool. And we try to align our training to be similar. What are the expectations of your employees? Well, you could have similar expectations of your volunteers and interns too, just with a little bit more flexibility because they are volunteers and interns. So, sometimes it's attendance. Our volunteer doesn't come in every week like they said. Well, then maybe we need to change their schedule to every other week. And then we can open a position for every other week for a new volunteer to come in and impact you in a little bit better. So that helps us know how many we're recruiting for as well. So as we, align with the support of HR, it's kind of helped us too, knowing and identify where the needs are in the agency, as well as how to better support our supervisors.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, one of the other findings was that organizations that engage volunteers are able to do the work they're doing at half of the median budget than organizations who don't engage volunteers. Now, that doesn't mean we lay staff off and we cut the budget. That's not what we're talking about. It's about increasing what you're capable of doing and increasing your impact in the community with volunteers, and therefore being able to do so much more, although your budget may not have changed. On the other hand, sometimes you have to invest to reap the benefits and to get that return on investment in the long run. This is just to show you nationwide. These the black flags are the hubs across the nation. And then as you can see, these are the service enterprises. This map is being updated. We just had nationally, we had several organizations get certified. It's very heavy East Coast. You saw on Raven's slide a Points of Light logo, and you will see it sometimes. So at the beginning, this program lived with Points of Light. Points of Light is still the backbone organization, but Alive is doing the day-to-day administration, and slowly but surely will be taking on the program now really lives with Alive at Alive. So on a national level. So if we'll talk about the model a little bit more, but if you get accredited, we take you through the training and the coaching. And then when we're ready to recommend accreditation, Alive does a final review, and the accreditation approval comes from Alive. So what does this model look like? So there is a comprehensive diagnostic. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We talked, Raven showed you a similar graphic and how they perform, how they scored on their diagnostic. This is research-based. You saw the early research had 8 characteristics. It now has grown to 12 characteristics with 77 best practices standards under it. And it is, as I said, research-based, and it's continually improving and growing as a tool, and as giving the organization feedback compared to where they're performing in comparison to these levels. And it's really, Raven said we weren't doing so well. It's like, it's not a scorecard, it's a baseline. It shows you where your strengths are and where there are some challenges according to the feedback of a cross-section from your staff that's taking this assessment. So that is really at the beginning of the process, really early on. It happens one-on-one. Then we do change management, volunteer engagement, training with the organization. Right now we're doing these virtual. There's 7 sessions. And it's really about promoting this cultural change and getting the whole organization to look at volunteerism. In between those sessions, you'll have a coach to start working on some really specific strategies and start moving the needle, or at least the planning stages. And then we recommend, it still says certification here. It is really an accreditation. There has been a branding change because it's an organization-wide model. The certification wasn't really the right term. An individual gets a certification, like a certified volunteer administrator. An organization gets accredited. So there we need to do still some updating. There's still some pieces here that need to be updated. That's been a recent. And then you have a network of, sorry, change that a little too fast. You have a network of peers that you can tap into. And Raven, we are really working on the Community of Practice National. I think you probably hadn't had a chance to attend yet, but so nationally we have a Community of Practice where service enterprises get together every other month. And as a hub, we are hoping to find the capacity to do it also on a 6-week basis, to bring together service enterprises and to exchange tools and knowledge and best practices and support each other, or just simply brainstorm and share experience. So that's obviously a great value in itself. So here again are these characteristics that we are assessing and that you will be working under to look at how to move the needle in your organization. When we go back to the model, Raven, you came in at a point where the organization had already gone through the training, and you shared a lot about how you had changed from how you had evolved and how you were able to put these strategies in. Can you talk a little bit more about the assessment tool and how you guys use that and the outcomes of that?
Which tool? This model?
The assessment.
Oh, the assessment.
The diagnostic, yeah.
So the diagnostic. So when the first diagnostic happened, you know, a new leaf had our agency's grown because we've had a lot of acquisitions. And so a lot of the programs have come in and they didn't really do a full change management as to operating in a new leaf way. They were still operating their programs. So bringing in volunteers in a capacity, some programs didn't realize they had to do it a certain way and things like that. So this brought to light, you know, a healthy change management system for us. And that's why now we've done a lot better with it, using this model, highlighting, okay, you know, what are we doing over here? I really had to dive into each program and ask them what they were doing. And that kind of led to us not just focusing on volunteers, but focusing on interns, because we realized some programs had interns as well. And then I was like, are they paid? No, then they're volunteers and I want them to. So we started doing that. But this really helped us map it out and talk about each area, like leadership. What did we need from leadership? And for a while we had leadership support, and we had you know, a leader, one of our chiefs participating with us in this process. But I was like, you know, I think this needs to go a little higher. I think we need a board member to, you know, so at the board meetings they have an understanding as to what's going on here. So having a board representative would be great. So we pulled in a board member to talk about and champion SEI skills, and I communicate with him to say, hey, these are things that we're doing and updates and anything that's going to happen in board changes. You know, just think about volunteers and interns. And it's not always the science of SEI, it's just think about volunteers and interns, how they fit in the picture. You know, technology we had to get aligned with as well. What is it that what would it take to get a volunteer to get an email and get into our system and be able to work and access everything? What would it take to get an intern a laptop to execute work that they need to do for the programs? We have clinical interns that do counseling and things like that. So we really went around every single area and we touched on everything. And a lot of these areas do overlap too. So as we're working in one section, it's improving another section at the same time without realizing it. It's just sitting down and measuring that and saying, oh, this works over here too. Oh no, we moved this pendulum a little bit more too. And so for me, it was a dive into the deep end of the pool though, because I had participated in the SEI agencies. I've learned about SEI, but I hadn't gone through the formal training as leading it. And then when I got hired into the agency, I definitely had to analyze every section, ask questions, and bring together a guiding coalition at first to say, hey, this is everything that we know. This is what is it that you want with volunteers and interns? So then we had a starting ground to then say, okay, how can we meet those needs? And also, how can we broaden perspective of what more volunteers and interns can do in the agency? And it grew into more relationship building with everybody in the agency and stronger ongoing communication. And we championed some programs first. We'd go into one program, champion them with an intern or a volunteer, and then invite them to speak on their experience with the rest of the programs. And now we have shelter volunteer placements across several shelters, and we use the same position description. So we've tweaked it enough times that fits every shelter's needs that we can say, let's bring in a shelter support intern. And when I train a new shelter manager too, I share with them, this is the position description these shelters are using. Unless you have any specific changes to it, would this fit your need? And they're like, no, this is great. We've held roundtables to get feedback from programs to share experiences, because we had one program that didn't really want a lot of volunteers to be client facing, but this a similar program was like, oh, we found so much more success when we finally let them be more client facing and interact. So now we're getting more retention on our volunteers and they're feeling more fulfilled. And then that led the other program to say, oh, so we can do that. And okay, we will do that, and open the door for us. So collecting feedback was huge, collaboration and putting them in similar structured round tables was great. We found gaps then too as to where our infrastructure might be struggling, what IT needed from us as volunteers and interns offboarded, and at what time frame they needed things from us. Same with HR, what did they need from us to help us cross-train these individuals to get them in the door? So it has been a journey, and the roadmap's taken us up, down, and everywhere. But I meet quarterly with a group of volunteers and some supporters to roadmap out what we've already done, how we've achieved it, and then what are our next steps? What are our next goals to focus on using these tools, so that we don't go too far off the path. Sometimes we do need a change. That quarterly touch point helps us understand why and where we need to direct it.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, so I heard a lot of feedback, giving and receiving feedback, and access to leadership, and evaluating where are we, how can we improve, this continuous improvement cycle. All really good things, and really excellent. Thanks for sharing. Little quick on the training and coaching, touching a little bit more about that. It's really, again, about creating that culture of volunteerism through the change management process. And Raven mentioned the guiding coalition. It is, when you take the assessment, we want, depending on the size of your organization, but we're really looking for 3 senior leadership roles to participate in that, and then have the cross section. So if you have a lot of different programs, you might want the program manager. IT is a good one for some of the things. So it really depends. Raven, how did you go about selecting the people that took the assessment at the beginning? And then how did you choose your guiding coalition people, which is really like your steering committee to move things forward?
At first, I don't know how those individuals were chosen at first, because they got certified before I arrived. But they end up being our champions. I think they had identified the programs as to those who currently had volunteers, those who wanted volunteers, and those who had not yet had volunteers. So some of the leaders that went and attended getting certified through this were a pick of people who had interest in this. Leadership, volunteers, and managers, and frontline staff. So they had a mix. And then as we move forward, we first started with those who had volunteers. Let's get us aligned. Let's see what they're doing. Let's evaluate, and then let's move forward. And then we moved to those programs that wanted volunteers and talked to them about what they wanted, what other programs are doing, what we had established as a process, and get them in the fold. And then we started to look at those who didn't have volunteers. We still have several programs that don't have volunteers yet. But every time a new program comes to me, I was like, I would like a volunteer. I'm like, win. That's my win. And let's see what we can start with, because we want to build them up for success. So sometimes what their idea of a volunteer or an intern can do doesn't always work. Our gateway right now has been interns, because of the number of hours that they can do. And then it's a trial. They have an end date, so we know where they're going to offboard at. So we try to get them. Let's see if we can get you an intern first. Oh, and the intern was great. It was a great experience. I would like another intern. I was like, okay. And then we talk about the more work that they have, so it's a lot of listening and just asking what they need. And once we get that identified, then I'm like, well, I think you could use maybe an admin volunteer, and they can be cross-trained also to do X, Y, and Z. Our position descriptions, I have the standard position description for some things. And then I have what I call endorsements, just tag-ons, because we have so many things that they have to jump through to get through. So if they want a shelter volunteer who's willing to drive and curry things back and forth, then currying is an endorsement to their position. Or if they want to work in the kitchen to do food, then that's an endorsement to their shelter support. So we know they have enough work to do, because currying may not be a fulfilling role, and just cleaning the kitchen might not be a fulfilling role. So we want to make sure we've established those fulfilling roles. So we've done that. And as we worked with those who wanted volunteers, they kind of helped us establish all the needs that they have them doing. And we broke them up into families and tasks so that we can structure the position descriptions well. And then we were able to share those with the other parties as we went. So creating that guiding coalition at first started with just who wanted to support. Then we brought in our groups. And then when we got recertified, we had champions across the agency already, and those champions I brought in as our recertification team as our guiding coalition. And they're still the groups that the individuals we reach out to on a regular basis with updates. They're also the ones that usually are the ones popping in our weekly virtual office hours, asking for help and support, and then just revisiting those tools. And at that time, collecting feedback from them. That's a weekly window to collect feedback about their experience. So it's been great. So we haven't continued with a formal guiding coalition, but we have those strong enough relationships that if we need to call for a meeting, we can now, and they know why and what it's and the worth of it.
Great, thanks. I heard a lot of stuff that reminds me of applying for scholarships or grant writing. So it's like these boilerplates, right? If somebody goes in the kitchen, they need a food handler's card, let's say. That is something that is in multiple job descriptions, and rather than reinventing the language each time, you just have these boilerplates that you plug and play to build a job description according to the need. That is fantastic. Lots of good stuff here, a lot of golden nuggets. And we talked about building the capacity and engaging senior leadership. You heard Raven say she has access to board members, she has access to her leadership. Leadership being interested, asking questions and or really wanting to know about what's going on with the volunteers. We're making investments on the front end, and then how is this investment working for us on the back end through regular reporting. That is just another key element that we want to see coming out of this accreditation process, if it's not already in place. That senior leadership sees the value and that it's happening on a regular basis. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the week.